All right. So today actually is our monthly session on the campaign I Honor My Parents, to help parents, educators find new resources and live better. And we are tailoring the session today to immigrant parents because it is very complex. For some, it may be very easy, but for majority, science already tells that to be an immigrant parent is double charge. You as an immigrant and then as a parent. So we compiled some information. It's not like a million because we don't have time, but some scientific information plus the Spiritist tools to give resources to immigrants. And when we talk about the challenges of life, it reminds us of a story that Brother X tells us in this book, Tales and Stories, probably when it gets translated, Contos e Apólogos. It's on PDF for everyone who reads in Portuguese. You can Google it, PDF it, and there is one chapter, chapter 23, that talks about, it's entitled Debt and Acquittance. And it talks about a lady who used to live in the northeast of Brazil in the year of 1856, like a year before Kardec published the Spirit's book. True account. She used to live there. She was a very wealthy woman. She had a farm, and guess what? At the time she had slaves. And according to tradition, every Christmas Eve, she would sit down just like this in her large, beautifully and elegantly decorated living room. She would sit at a chair, and her 66 slaves would come to her asking for her blessing. Amazing. We say we're Christians and we behave in this way. And she would enforce that each and every slave comes to her, kiss her hand, and asks for the blessing by saying, "May the blessing of Lord Jesus Christ be with us." And she would say, "Praise the Lord," and would receive a kiss on her hand. But that night was a different night, because in the line of 66 slaves, there was one young lady, one slave, who was named Matilde. And she had two children. One of them actually was like a newborn. And just behind, as you can see in the picture, which is from Project Imagem from Brazil by Américo Sucena, he has this beautiful portraits of many of these classical Spiritist books. And here he portrays the very slave keeper who is behind Matilde and her children, awaiting for their time to receive the blessing of the woman. But when she comes close to the lady of the house, she doesn't like what she sees, because she sees two children. And we know all over the world where there were slaves, they didn't allow the children to be with the slaves. Either they were sent somewhere else or they were killed. It depended. In this case, the slave keeper had already told, her name was Maria, and she said, "You know, I want to talk to you, Matilde, but not here. Let us go outside." She takes, the slave keeper brings the lady, Matilde, the slave, her children, and accompanies the owner of the farm. They stopped by because the farm had the river Paraíba, for those who know, running exactly through her farm. She stops right there and says, Matilde, and asks, "Matilde, whose child is this?" "The little baby." And she says, well, they are from, they say in Portuguese, Nhô Chico, meaning Mr. Francisco. You mean my son? Yes, I'm so sorry, but he is. Because the slave owners used us to abuse the slaves, and they couldn't do anything. And if they got pregnant, they were even more abused because they were punished by those who didn't know that it happened. And that's exactly the case of Matilde. The mom of the boy who did this, she got furious and she said, no. I'm going to free you, Matilde, and your children are going to be sent to the market. And once you're free, you can go and buy them. But as of now, you're free. You can cross the river. That's your freedom. And the river is not like a small river. It's like a very large river. And she wouldn't make it to the other side of the river. She didn't care. She asked for mercy. Matilde turned to her owner and said, please, my lady, don't do this to me. I can do something, whatever you like, to have my children back, to be with them. Please give me another opportunity. She said, you're free. You can go ahead. And then she gave a sign to the slave keeper, and he started using the whip to force Matilde to jump on the river and go. She was forced to. Crying, she was almost like pushed by the whip to go into the river. She dove into the river, and she didn't make it. Soon after, they could see a body just floating over the river. Brother X says that 100 years passed that day. And on the very Christmas Eve of 1956, 100 years later, the slave owner was reincarnated in the body of a very poor lady, not in the northeast of Brazil, in the southern part, in the state of Minas Gerais, same state of Chico Xavier, in the city of Passa Quatro. She had a husband and she had children, but one night, on the very same night, Christmas Eve, 100 years later, it was raining so much that it started flooding everything. And the flood became so strong that it took them out of their house. And it was such a strong rain, the flood was like unbearable, that she drowned in the waters of that rain on the very Christmas Eve, 100 years later. We asked the Spirit side, why do you tell us these stories, right? We want to read books that bring us hope and consolation. But this is the very story of all of us. And the spirits usually say that either 50 years later, 50 years after one reincarnation, 100 years past, more likely, we are here living. So who knows what we were in a previous life? Where were we? I don't know. But here we are. And much like this lady, we are here for some reason. She was not reborn in the same location of the very same country. She was reborn in a different region. Every reincarnation, we're reincarnating in different areas of the planet. It's funny because people say they are mistaken about patriotic feelings. But who knows if we were born in the previous life in a very country that had an animosity with the country where we were born in this life. Isn't that a paradox? Because we are mistaken, or we feel out of place, and we forget maybe we're just returning as immigrants today, but to the country that used to be our own in a previous life. Who knows? Today, science says, this is a quite recent census that brought to us 2005, the idea that this is about the immigrant population in the world, and you can tell by the colors of the countries and the continents how much the percentage of immigrants that they have in the country. So you can tell, like, for example, in the United States, Canada, we have around like 10-20% of immigrants, much more, like 10-20 or 15-20 times more than, for example, Brazil. So people here are much more used to being around immigrants than when we are there, which gives us a lot of hints and tips about how easy we deal with differences, how tolerant we are. And in other countries, you can tell, like Europe, you can almost tell, though it's like so many countries within a small piece of territory there compared to other countries like the United States or Canada, you can tell that they have higher rates of immigration. No wonder. Even in Spiritism, if you go in England, Germany, Italy, give talks there, people are so used to translation, like consecutive translation on stage, that for them it's just like second nature. They are used to many different languages, unlike ourselves here, who are used to most likely one language, depending on where we are. If we're in Florida, like at least English and Spanish. But South America, Central America, so many countries in Africa, and some parts of larger continents in Asia, they have less than 1% of immigrants. But total in the world, it's a current census. Actually, this number is more recent. It's from 2008. It says 200 million immigrants. 200 million. It's quite a lot. From other studies, we get to know that each person who immigrates needs to, this is a scientific word, acculturation. It seems like lack of culture, it's the opposite. It's acquisition of new elements to our culture. So pretty much when migrants get in contact with natives, they get in contact with each other, inevitably they're going to go through changes. Not only those who come in, but also it affects the host group. It changes. And there is, hopefully, a mutual adaptation. Hopefully. But it's not that easy and simple. Because there is a pathway of intercultural learning that must exist, and not everybody is ready. If we have been immigrants, even if we have not immigrated in this life, but we're living this life and we feel like the same person throughout our lives, something is wrong. When people elsewhere who have come to know us, come to us and say, man, you have changed. You look so American. That's probably a good sign if you're living in America. It's a sign that we have adapted. That's what scientists say. If we look the same as when we were in another country after a long period of time, that's a sign that we are what they call in science ethnocentric. Ethnocentric is someone who thinks that their culture is better than others. And to leave this room, because nowadays even companies are telling you need to be culturally competent. Every business nowadays, they are looking for employees who are so flexible that they can quickly jump into different cultural settings and blend in and be effective. Not only communicating fluently, and clearly, but also being, efficient in adopting values, the customs, cultural features, to go through this, as this scientist says, David Hoops, almost in a visionary way. He tells us we need to walk, it's like a pathway, step by step, from ethnocentricity to awareness. First, we need to be aware, really, is my culture really the best? It can't be, because if I talk to somebody else, they're going to think theirs is the best. So something, why am I going to be encapsulated? So being aware that there are differences. That's what our children are doing right now. They planned a specific lesson today on tolerance. It's about, okay, there are other ways of living. There are ways of thinking, of dressing, of eating. And why do people behave that way? So then I start learning. That's why the SSB goes to museums, especially more American history related, to make us feel like, why do people feel this and that way? Because there was a time that we didn't understand it either. And we were prejudiced at once. And then we said, uh-oh, something is wrong here. We need to understand more. Why? And then start accepting and respecting. Saying, I know why Americans are so patriotic. They had to fight so hard for their country. It didn't come easy to be the United States of America. It's a unity. They came with a very strong price, and still does to date. It's very difficult. Compared to other nations that came along with a very different history, people didn't have to go through their families. It's about the family. If each and every family had to go through that shock of being in a battle, of being hurt, or losing their members to fight for a cause, it passes from generation to generation, and this patriotic feeling is deeply rooted in them. We're not even talking about the spirits who reincarnate and are the same spirits back then, of course. But once we accept and respect, we start appreciating and saying, I think these values are interesting. Like we talked about on Thursday at the meeting of the SSB, I was sharing, like, for example, in some countries, if you are a psychotherapist, even in some parts of Brazil, and you have a website with your picture, it's considered unethical. And not only that, they think that you're showing off. In the United States, if you don't have a website, people think you lack professionalism. So once you understand, then we are more culturally adapted. Then we more easily appreciate it. Like when we come to meetings in the United States, even in science. Science in Brazil, you go to some lab meetings, it's like the boss talks and everybody just keeps quiet. In the United States, if you keep yourself quiet, they think you don't think anything and you have to speak up for them to know, either as a graduate student or postdoc, a junior professor or a senior professor. You have to speak up to be considered someone who really thinks. And that's not showing off. It's about the rules of engagement in that profession. So once we get to know of it, we appreciate it, and then we will probably select some values and customs and start adopting in our lives. Only those who go through these steps will be considered truly culturally adapted and be into this mindset of multicultural person. Majority of these 200 million immigrants they don't even know about it. It's about survival. It's all about survival. Coming, settling in, adapting as quick as possible, making sure we have a steady life and stay there and raise a family. But then on the behind the scenes, there are lots of things that are happening. And this is what they say. The acculturation model talks about this adoption of new customs and values that sometimes people are not used to. It's about behaviors and beliefs that reflect our home country culture. And then you have to adopt new things to reflect more of the host country and be accultured. So changing even the way we dress belongs to being accultured. There is no way to say, oh, I'm so adapted and I am dressing up exactly and behaving exactly and I eat exactly the same things and I listen to the same songs and I watch the same programs and I say, I'm 100% adapted. Science tells it doesn't happen that way. And then we are going to understand why some conflicts in the family exist. If not in the family, between our family and other families, and in the community, and then adaptation doesn't happen so well. One example of this that was in this handbook of cultural psychology put together by scientists Morelli and Rothbaum in 2005, they talk about one example of this. They researched Turkish and Moroccan immigrant parents in the Netherlands, and they observed that they give more importance to cultural maintenance in their home and family context, but they consider some adaptation more important in work situations. Much like many people in the United States. In their homes, they speak their language, they eat their food just like in their country, and they watch the same programs from the TV that they watch there, etc. But then when they go to work, they behave and display the same behaviors and customs and values as the host country. That's like what they call semi-acculturation. It's not full acculturation. So some of the challenges that other scientists observe is that, for example, they give example of research that they had within the Asian community, especially Chinese Canadians. And they observe, much like what happens in the United States as well, Chinese parents who have a very different upbringing in their homes regarding the relationship between parents and their children, and also how they raise their children. Just like this lady, she said, you know, whenever we have guests at home, I tell my children, look, if you have toys, share with your guests, because you know they're here to see us, etc., etc. But then one day, she had a school meeting, and a teacher came to her and said, look, I'm asking you to teach your child to be more assertive. Really? She needs to learn to say no. Because in the Chinese community, the community is more important than the personal need. Which, for us in Spiritism, is really a plus. But in the American culture, it's not seen as a plus. Priority is always given to the person, to the individual. It's what you want versus what everybody wants. Especially to a child. If you don't want it, you have to say you don't want it, you don't like it, you don't want to share, and it's valid. In the Chinese culture, they observe it's not valid. So then what happens? When grandparents come to visit the parents, parents are already adapted in these differences, but when then grandparents come to help, there is a bigger conflict because they turn to the parents and say, what are you doing with these children? The way you're raising them, it doesn't match with our culture. And they don't understand because they are not outside. They depend 100% on their children to go even to the market. So they don't understand why these differences are happening. And then conflicts may raise in the family, challenges, and even inner conflicts in the parents. Or, for example, as another study shows, immigrant mothers from South America in general, they share more cognitions and practices, meaning they talk more about how they feel and what they think amongst American mothers than with mothers in their own culture. You know, mothers getting together and talking and observing and exchanging. And these studies showed, probably in Central American countries, etc. I'm not sure. I don't think they talk much about Brazil here. They talk about other Spanish-speaking countries in which this is not very common. So there is a conflict. For parents, they go pick up their children at school, and the type of conversation that happens between parents may be very different from mothers who have to pick up their kids, and the habits of sleeping over, etc., which is not very common in other cultures in South America, for example, like it is in the United States. And that may raise a lot of challenges for immigrant parents because they don't understand. They think like, what is this habit? This custom of people like sleeping over? What is this? I'm not gonna let my child sleep over, right? And they think like it's noxious, it's pernicious, and it's going to be very threatening to their children. And then challenges start happening between them and other parents, or within themselves, or even within the family itself. Additional challenges that scientists report. They say, which is more critical, that immigrant parents may be misunderstood and judged by agencies, by parents in school, by the teachers who don't understand the way they're raising their children, their habits, and that may cause a lot of problems. We didn't bring here one element that is quite serious nowadays about deportation. Lots of children who are today in foster care, they are children of parents of immigrants who were deported, which is probably the saddest scenario. To imagine that you come, bring your children stay, or if they are Americans, they are born here, they stay here, and you're deported and you cannot talk to your child anymore unless you have somebody in between, and many of them don't have anybody. So it's quite sad. So we're talking about being misunderstood and judged also by our values and by a lack of multiculturalization. They say more. Science reports that parents may feel that their ways of upbringing is not effective. Their parenting skills now is ineffective because in this different culture, it's like, in my country, we don't do this, but then the child comes and says, but mom, we do it here. And then, boom, conflict. So it's like additional challenge to parenting. So science already reports there is a double challenge when an immigrant becomes a parent. That is not for us to give up, but to find resources. These challenges, they sum up by saying they come due to three different factors. One, because parents themselves have sometimes difficulty adapting. Because we as human beings, we have to adapt, and it's not easy. It's like one element. Plus, there is the element that because they have to work sometimes very hard, they don't have time to be with their children. Of course, we know in the United States, well, it's probably the case, majority of parents in general, not only immigrant parents, but immigrant parents, people say usually work much more because they usually work more than one job. So They have less time to stay with their children. So they are going through their change. Plus, there is the lack of time with the child. And there is language barrier. We don't need more than that, right? So this is just so we know how compelling the issue is for us to address and not to run away and dismiss and say, no, no, this doesn't happen to me. That denial just postpones the problems, and we need to face it. These are real things that happen with immigrant parents. And they mount and escalate to the most difficult problem in the relationship with their children, what science classifies as dissonant acculturation. What is it? Dissonant acculturation is when, the definition so we don't forget, it occurs when the children's learning of English and American ways and simultaneously lost the immigrant culture outstrip of their parents. So it's majority of the cases. Exceptions to some families. But they are like, they learn English, they turn to their parents like, and they look down the parents because they don't speak as fluently. 2, they push away the culture from the parents because it's like, what is this? This is your Brazilian way, or this is your Chinese way, this is your African way, and they start feeling like they're the child of somebody else. This is what science says. It's already a phenomenon. It's a fact. It may happen. It doesn't happen in 100% of the cases, but in majority of the cases. Then what do? Can Spiritism help? Can science help? Science to date has a lot of beautiful theories and facts, but help, we know. It's not at our door yet. So that's why we're tailoring the rest of this conversation to the Spiritist help. Spiritism can help. Can. Why? Because it changes the way we see ourselves as immigrants, first and foremost. And much like the story of the slave owner, it brings to our mind that we're not immigrating here, there, or anywhere else by chance. And we don't end up anywhere in this world, either born or immigrated, just because. Because everything is overseen by God. And we only end up where God still allows us to end up, where there is still something for us to learn. So the first thing that Spiritism says is we need to raise awareness. Number 1. To be an immigrant parent is not an easy task. To deny it and say, oh, piece of cake, it's not true. There are levels, but we need to know that it entails much more than the ordinary parenting. It has the family around, the same habits, etc. Problems may raise up, but not of this nature. Problems of immigration are very different. And we're not even including problems such as when we don't have documentation, because it just adds to the stressors. I didn't put a slide here that talks about the scientific evidence that immigrant parents may be at a greater risk of mental illnesses, from depression to anxiety to pathological stress, due to the stress of immigration. It's not for us to blame the country. It's about inner discovery. If there is that trigger, it's something within. So raising awareness is the number 1, And getting to know, as we did at Kardec Radio today when we talked to Jenny Duncan from England. She's an adorable missionary in England. And she actually stated this: incarnation is not a holiday. And it's so funny. She's so cute when she says that. She's like, Vanessa, reincarnation is not a holiday. People need to understand that. You know, coming from a well-lived life, we have to sit down and listen. It's like, what do you mean by it? And she says, people need to know we're not here to sit down, sit back, relax, have a good life. We're here to learn and to work. So Spiritism will tell parents, look, when we put in mind that we are immigrated for a specific reason, and there are lessons to learn, we are open to opportunities. Whereas if we come here just to take advantage, and if the doors are not open, then we start bad-mouthing and cursing everything, then we're not aware that this life is for learning. In the Spirit's book, Kardec asked the question 123, why do we need to incarnate? It's not even about reincarnation, about incarnation. Why? Okay, where are we at this moment? Are we seated on the chair? Who is seated on the chair? Or what is seated on the chair? The body. Where are we? Spirits. We're not here, seated. We're in the spiritual realm. And why are we here, incarnated? It's like going to school. We wear a uniform and go to school to learn. And then we dress up our children and say, go to school. They go there and they start playing. And they come back and say, what is this? You think this is a holiday? It's not a holiday. You have to go there, sit down, learn, come back. When holiday comes, holiday it is. But it's not a holiday yet. The same to us. When we wake up, dress up the uniform of the day, and go to the school of life. School it is. Learning. So there's no expectation that we'll be there and say, oh, I wish I were so rich that I would have fun the whole day. What kind of fun? Because depending on the level of our evolution, fun is different. Fun may be different. Entertainment may be very different for people who are more evolved. And the spirits say, how fast can we evolve? And Kirsten reminded that to us on Thursday. As fast as we want. Nobody's going to block us. Nobody. There's no limit to what we can do. And the spirits say, well, these are the reasons why we need to incarnate. They say, to achieve perfection. But I don't like the word perfection. Well, I can't help it. It's the way they state. Perfection it is. To redress previous mistakes. Janet Duncan said today, she's 84. I repeat, she has, led a life of challenges. Somebody who went to Brazil for some reason, got to know Spiritism, had to do what she had to do, came back to the United Kingdom. As a British lady, she found nobody in Spiritism to cherish Spiritism with her. She didn't keep it to herself in her home saying, oh, poor me, there is nobody there. Share. Went to the bookstore. Oh, do you know any group? Oh, they need a teacher. We have 6 people. Okay. I will join them. And she has been leading that group since 83. Since 83. She has found challenges. When people came there, they didn't understand. She was a good disciplinarian, etc., etc. She never stopped. She helped with translations. She helped in so many ways. And we visited her center, very aligned to Spiritism. She got to know Chico Xavier. And she embraced it, very well adapted to the Brazilian culture, though being British, and back to England, readapting, embracing Spiritism and settling in the flag of Spiritism. And embracing it and tailoring her life around it. She had financial problems. She had sentimental problems, as she says. But still she kept on going because she said, sometimes, Vanessa, we think we're such a good person. We think we're so good. But if we truly think about who we are, we're going to think we're not that good. Now imagine, she says, in previous lives, in which we know we were worse than today. So then we think, why are we here? For a holiday? And we agree with her. She's right. When she's reminding us we're still probably going to live for a while here, probably, only God knows, that we are here also to redress previous mistakes and to do our share in God's universe, and that only between us and God. We need to do what we need to do. We cannot tell somebody, why do you have 5 children? That's crazy. Uh-oh. It's between them and God. If they feel like they have to, let them alone. Because they have to do what they have to do. It's between them and God, right? It's also between us and God what we do and what we have to do. Because what others do is not going to be in our thing. Oh, but I didn't do this because they, oh really? But you didn't do it. So they will, like Mother Teresa said, it's between them and God, between us and God. So first thing for parents who are immigrants, Spiritism can help by saying, look, be aware. You're not in that new country by chance. Divaldo Franco says in one of the issues of the Spiritist magazine, when we ask him, what about immigrants? And he says kindly, not in a judgmental way, most part of us come back to give back what we took away. Very kind words. And it's not by chance. So we're not here to take. We are here to give back.
The Brazilian feeling. Contribution.
Gioni. Yeah, if that's your feeling, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to judge any culture. I'm just going to say in general. We are here to give back to the country, to the community, in whatever way we feel. We're just bringing the Spiritist teachings. It doesn't matter the culture, because there are wonderful cultures in this world, including the very one in which we are living in, the American culture. And as Joseph says, as we are immigrating, as it is as if we are reincarnating in a reincarnation, with the disadvantage that we remember everything that we have lived in this life. You see how God, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, which we don't have anymore, which is a good sign, we sold out. But a good sign for us when people say, oh, what about forgetting the past? How does God want us to fulfill our task if we don't remember what we've done and what we have to do? Thank God we don't remember, because when we remember, it's easy to erase. We don't start new, like Godinho, when he was giving the last Skype meeting here on a Thursday, he said, every day we should wake up with a blank page. Don't write what you have done and have experienced yesterday on this blank page, because if you do it, there's no more space to learn anything new. And that's why we start living a life like holding grudges, always negative about the same people, that person is changed, is moved forward, and we're still there, holding grudges, writing the same old story in every new blank page of our books. And then we go through one whole reincarnation with minimal learning, if any. Not to say new debts, as André Louis says. Because we are writing the old in the new every day. Instead of writing new in the new, old in the new. So that's why Kardec says, it is a blessing when God grants us an opportunity to reincarnate and forget. Because in this life, as Mother Teresa says in a beautiful clip I couldn't bring today, but I recommend anybody Google Mother Teresa herself telling about forgiveness. She says, to forgive is to forget. And she doesn't say in the sense of, oh, you're never going to remember. You're not going to repeat it. Because you say, oh yeah, I've forgiven, but let me tell you the story. No, you haven't forgiven. Because you're repeating the story for 30 years. Don't tell it anymore, she says. Don't talk about it. That's to forget. And to whose benefit? To the person. Because the other one is moving forward. So in that regard, are we ready to reincarnate? So if we know somebody is immigrating, tell them, look, do you know, maybe you're not a spirit, but I tell you, be prepared. This is not Hollywood. You're not going to be in a Hollywood movie when you come. It's going to be different. Coke is the same. ATM machines are very similar. Not even Coke is the same. The taste is the same, probably. But many things are the same. It's not like going from China to London. It's much more difficult language-wise, etc. But we need to tell them, psychologically, it's going to be different. And you need to empower your language skills. Because that is going to be the greatest tool for you to feel adapted. If you can communicate, you're in. If you cannot, you're out. And if you feel out, self-esteem is down. So why we're saying this? Because to help ourselves, the Gospel according to Spiritism says the main thing, say no to melancholy. Oh, because we are like this when we come in, and that's natural. But we need to help people saying, look, it's natural. But because if people could prepare us, we will probably suffer less. So we need to help others. I remember when some postdocs were coming here, and I told them, they were not spirits, say, look, these things are going to be different. At the beginning, exciting. Soon after, you're going to feel this, that, or the other. So be prepared. Because if people don't tell us, we suffer more. So Spiritism can tell us. And the Spirit Georges says, his own words, believe me when I tell you to resist these tendencies with all your strength, as they only weaken your willpower. If we stay melancholic like this, oh, old times were so much better. Oh, my home in my country. Oh, the food, the parties, the TV. We're seeing for all immigrants, it's very much the same. If we stay like that, this Spirit says, we're going to lack willpower. When our will goes down, what comes in? Depression. Many people call us at the SSB, SSVA, the magazine, the radio, and say, oh, I don't know, I was a happy person there, but when I came here, or when I moved to England, or whomever, immigrants, they're like, I started feeling depressed. Yes, it's natural, because there's something we need to let go. And in depression, there's a lot of anger, of frustration sometimes. It's like, I want things to be that way, and I cannot make that way, so then I, boom, get depressed. We all go through this. It's human nature. But we can prevent it by not staying melancholic. Oh, let me listen to those music today. And if that's putting us down, change it. Because that's not going to help. We have to force ourselves not to say the spirit company. The spirits who don't like us, they're there whispering. That's why on Thursdays we're studying the book Torments of Obsession, to know how it happens. And they say on Thursday, it's very subtle. And they whisper words. And usually, as Kardec says in the Medium's book, chapter 23, these voices come to us and they whisper everything against what can help us, or people who can help us. They come and say, oh, that person. Sometimes it's our doctor. We go see our doctor and they create an animosity. So we stop seeing our doctor, our therapist. We stop going to the gym. There was one person I know, she was suffering from obsession. She was coming to the gym and she told me, and she said, Vanessa, I came to the gym because I knew my doctor said I had to go to push myself out of this state of mind. But the day I went there, I was shocked because I saw this boy feeling ill and he was like laying down, and then the ambulance came in and I was like, oh my God, maybe that's what's going to happen to me. She left the gym. The spirits can create a plot against us when they don't like us. The spirits say, they said to Chico Xavier, Emmanuel always said, be humble before the obsessors, Chico. Do not confront them, because they have power. On Thursday we studied the power of invisibility, especially to those who are not mediums. And even to mediums could be many other ways, because they can disguise themselves. And what they do, Kardec says, they push us away from all the resources that can help us. Even Spiritist centers for immigrants. Don't go. Because they want this. They want you to change. They want you to do that. And it's like, what? A Spiritist center is going to do me harm? It's only the voice of the evil forces. Especially nowadays. As Mentor Joseph has been saying, and Divaldo Franco has been reminding all the time, these are critical times on the earth. Especially for us in the United States. You know the news. The anti-US forces, etc. We cannot indulge and think it's nothing to do with us. We have to pray day in, day out to help the community, because some people, they will get lost in these waves of thoughts, these currents of thoughts. They're so detrimental. They want to kill Americans, not only in the flesh, elsewhere. They want to push them to suicide, and no wonder suicidal rates are escalating. Depression, etc. So we need to think, be humble, and understand this is also our test. It's our time. We're strong, and we're going to strengthen our willpower. How? How? By using the Spiritist Center as a community of support. Science says immigrant parents need community support. And we have already identified in a research that we did in the United States, yes, Spiritist centers have already become a community of support. The problem is this support needs to be effective and not temporary. It's not an Advil. We come here, oh, Brazilian, and we say for the majority, like many places, you go there, we speak Portuguese, eat Brazilian food, and talk about Brazil, and feel like Brazil. It's like an Advil. You take it, the headache is gone, but we don't know the root of the problem. It's not gone. We have to take Advil all the time. Here, the effectiveness in the Spiritist Center needs to be very direct. What science is giving to us is the need for immigrant parents to reunify family with the fraternal assistance that is done. It's a lot of invisible work to many eyes. The fraternal assistance, the talks, the courses, the activities for the children, these excursions that we do to places that are American related, in our case, to make people feel like connected to the country, both parents and children together, so they see their parents acculturating themselves in that, in the country that is theirs. It's theirs. We cannot say, but you need to learn about my country. It's pride. But it's my country. Pride, it's their country. We're going to fight my country, your country. That's pride. Spiritism tells, no, we don't go there. And they say more. They say by doing activities in which, like the SSB does, to bring the family together, and especially in the English language. Everywhere we go to give talks, we tell them, look, it's good to be together, to be a support, but to be effective, we need to speak the language of the country. It's sacrificial, but we need to do it. Why? Because we think we're helping each other by speaking the native language of the immigrant country. But we are not. Recently we were in Florida in a very nice, very good center, but they speak Portuguese most of the time. And we told them in a long day of workshops, I said, look, you're going to experience this. We're going to come here tomorrow. Today, after this long day, eating Brazilian food, which we love, talking Portuguese all the time, feeling like, whew, we are in our home country. It's great. The minute you step out of this country, you're going to have a shock. You're going to realize, oh, it's not Brazil. The next day, I was surprised. I told them, but I didn't expect they would come back and tell the stories. 3-5 people came along, and I remember some of them saying, some were crying. I was like, oh my gosh, don't need to cry. It's okay, it's normal. But they didn't know. They said, Vanessa, I went to Starbucks to drink coffee. It was like 8 p.m. And somebody turned to me and said, hi, how are you? And then I was like shocked because I the whole day listening things in Portuguese. And then when people addressed me in English, I was like, what do I say? I couldn't reply. I felt incapable. Really? And then the other one said, you know, at my work, I hide. Whenever I see people coming to address me in English, I try to run away so they don't have to talk to me because I don't know what to say, I don't know what to reply. I'm afraid. And I feel undermined. It's exactly what we're talking about. If Spiritist centers want to be an effective community support for immigrants, they need, wherever they are in the world, they need to bring the community to speak the language of the country where they are in. To have less difference between parents and children. Everywhere else they tell, but Vanessa, our children will be the Spiritist leaders. And I often ask, Spiritism has been in the United States for many generations. In the United States, the first waves, besides the Americans themselves who knew Kardec, in new waves in the 20th century, they were of Spanish-speaking languages. And then the second wave were Brazilians, with Chico Xavier in 65. Where are they? Because by now, there would be people older than me here, leading in English the Spiritist movement. Where are they? They are living here. Are they Spiritists? Have they become speakers? Why? We found out why. Because they were often doing English activities for the children, but Portuguese or Spanish-speaking ones for the adults. When those children and teenagers grew to adults, they didn't identify with the parents. They often said, "It's my parents' religion." Because there was no identification, psychologically speaking, with the adult environment, which was totally not acculturated to the country. And for them, it's like a different country. This is the reason why we have been discovering through this research and survey that for our children and the parents to be on the same page, parents need to make an effort to speak the language of the country. Not in their own homes, that's not the thing we say, but to show their children that they are adapted to the country. They're not ETs in the country of their own children. Because that's how their children look. Science reports it. The children look at their parents like, I don't know, you. Many of them are like this. There is this strangeness. So speaking the language will help parents in their self-esteem. Reports say, just like this, that immigrants in the United States who speak the English language with certain fluency have higher self-esteem. Science reports, and this is very important for us to empower parents, because there are spirits all the time with us. If our self-esteem is down, what do obsessors do? Shh, they conquer. Isn't that the ancient, the Roman paradigm? Divide and conquer. And mentally speaking, if we're divided, our self-esteem is down. We're not feeling too good, empowered, capable. Oh, it's a feast for the obsessors. They come in, they conquer. And then they avenge us. And then we end our lives filled with regrets because they start, you know what they do? That's why Thursdays are important. They show like a case of this man who was a homeless. How did he become a homeless? In a previous life, he was a man who had a lot of money, a lot of power, but was very cruel to the people. He conquered a lot of enemies. That life, he was born very poor, in a family of parents who were very cruel to him as well. And in one of the family settings, when he was 13 years of age, he learned to drink. And then he started drinking. Became an alcoholic. With the influence of the obsessors, that alcoholic behavior just escalated. And then, what was the plan of the obsessors? To push him to commit a crime. So then people would hate him and lynch him. And that's exactly what happened. He was at a bar, drinking with his usual friend, And then in an argument, he saw a knife. He wasn't in his senses. He was also being influenced by not only alcohol, but the obsessor. He got the knife. And people were so outraged the way he ended the life of that friend that the people who were around lynched him. And he died in a very tragic way. So many times when we see people committing huge crimes, it's probably because they were under obsession. And how many immigrant parents start making mistakes one after the next, and they don't notice? It's probably because they are under obsession as well. So we need to observe this, and when we teach the country that they are living in, the language of the country, we are empowering them. If we care, we do it. Some people told me once in New York, Vanessa, but I care the people in my center. I do it all in Portuguese. If you really care, you do it in English. Because they don't need to be reminded of a country they don't live in anymore. We appreciate, we love, we are grateful. But we need to help them be acculturated in this country to live better. This is therapy. It's a sacrifice, but it's a needed one. So this is one of the best ways to help immigrant parents. Tell every immigrant parent, go get fluency in the language. You're going to feel how your life is going to change. Between you and your child, you and your workplace, everything else. Don't run away from it, because it's going to cost your self-esteem. And finally, we cannot finish this package of Spiritist tools for immigrant parents without the immigrant of all times. And people may be like, really? Jesus was an immigrant? He was. He was not of the earth, was he? He said himself, my kingdom is not of this world. And even Brother X reports to him, like Spirits through Divaldo Franco, Amélia Rodrigues, they report Jesus as being a pilgrim. He was not of this world. He's not. He is not a native of the earth. And he is our model because he was passing by with elegance. An elegance that inspires us for parents, for all of us. Because he taught one parent, not only, but one of them, and a man who followed him, a good remedy. He said to Bartholomew, Bartholomew was in that mood that we would say today, depressive mood, majority of people. Especially parents who are immigrants, struggling, being challenged by the new culture, by not having time with their children, by the language barriers, so many obstacles. And they're feeling defeated by all obstacles. Much like Bartholomew, he came to Jesus and was, Master, what you teach is beautiful, but really, I cannot do what you're teaching. Because my brothers, they are always putting me down. My father is always saying bad stuff to me. People don't understand me. In my own family, they don't treat me right. People don't understand me. So, how can I actually apply this? I feel so much sadness in my heart. And Jesus turns and gives one remedy that is probably the remedy for all of us in general, and especially to parent immigrants, because they are missionaries with their children and they need a special remedy. What is it? He says, Bartholomew, this message of the gospel is of happiness, of joy. Have you seen a message that talks about happiness that doesn't bring this joy? So all the ones who really want to feel it, their trademark must be, he said, of courage to face the obstacles. Don't run away from the lessons to learn, of hope that tomorrow when we pay our debts, we're going to be much lighter. And the joy of what? Being a child of God, because the future that lies ahead of us is beautiful, is very promising. So everyone who really wants to follow this amazing, incomparable immigrant needs to embrace this remedy, these molecules of courage, joy, and hope, reminding ourselves always. And if we have already prayed for Bezerra de Menezes, Dr. Bezerra, if we have prayed to Chico, sometimes people are so overwhelmed, they're like, oh my gosh, Vanessa, I already prayed for Joana de Angelis, for Euripides Barçanufo, for Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, for Jesus. Well, pray to God. Pray to God. Why? Because in the Spirit's book, we get to know God is everywhere, all the time. He knows of everything. And He's the one who gives us life. Is there anything more powerful than the divine providence? No. So when we don't have strength, we go for the only resource we have, God. And in there, we'll find all these elements, the joy, the courage to face, and also the hope. Tomorrow is going to be different. And this life is so fast. And it's worth the sacrifice, because when we finish this life, no regrets. No regrets. There is no better life than a life without a regret. So with that in mind, we will prepare ourselves for the moments of the therapy of the passes and the water, keeping in mind that today we become multipliers for others who are out there, probably in our lives, who could not come here or are not spiritists. And we can share these elements, telling them that there is always a solution out there. There is always a way to empower our parents and prepare the next generation with humility and love. So we're going to turn off the lights and just dim them to prepare for the therapy of the spirits, as we have already evoked so many of them in our words. And they certainly are so loving and kind that they are in the remotest places on the earth. They welcome simplicity. They welcome our efforts. Let us feel loving spirit doctors, nurses, and therapists, all dressed up in white, coming into the room. They are so many, and there is space for many more. Let us feel that they came in with a folder in their hands. Each folder is a personal chart of each one of us. They know exactly the remedy, the procedure that we need. Let us surrender to their care by raising our thoughts even higher, breathing in deeply and out slowly. Feeling this air which is filled with healing oxygen, penetrating our minds, our spiritual body, our physical body. Letting go of the toxins, feeling them close to us, laying their loving hands onto us. And there is a blue light that envelops our heads, our spiritual and physical bodies, cleansing, and then a white light, scanning through us and re-energizing us. Let us feel their treatment onto us. Observe that picture, the doctor in front of you, see his loving eyes and his smile. Let us remember that these spirit doctors live their lives to help others as they are helping us now. It's their legacy of love. And let us observe and feel that our therapy now brings the soothing voices of angelic children singing hymns of love, praising God. Their song tells us about the many lives we have lived in many parts of this planet. They show us a picture of the planet Earth. Let us help the spiritual mentors, and especially the mentor of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, Benjamin Franklin. Let us join forces with him as he partakes in the theme of Jesus to help the evolution of the planet. Let us visualize a beautiful, pacifying light of love enveloping the planet Earth, calming down the waves of confusion and tumult, substituting them by soothing notes of love. We are children of God, and we listen to their invitation as we raise our thoughts even higher and visualize everyone's homes being cleansed by this light of love. Let us pray for our president and send him and his family the strength to endure these challenges with our support. Dear God, we unite our thoughts as of this moment to pray for all of our brothers and sisters who are on the earth in strong need of help, whether material or spiritual, or both. May we become more harmonious to collaborate with the harmony of the planet. We pray especially for the leaders of all types, that they get balanced, recentered and realigned with you to fulfill their task in this critical time on the earth. And may the millions of immigrant parents feel your loving embrace, encouraging them to fulfill their mission as parents, educators, and overcome their obstacles with dignity and inspired by you. May the water we shall drink bring us another element of the therapy that your mercy, your loving providence brings to us. And so be it.